The year 2026 has come and gone, but the way we mark time still raises interesting questions. Most of us grow up using a calendar that counts the years from the supposed birth of Jesus. Yet historians today openly acknowledge that this date is uncertain. Many sources suggest he may have been born around 4 to 6 years before the point we call year 1. And of course, there's no actual year 0 in that system. It simply jumps from 1 BC to AD 1. But the real issue isn't the technical flaws of the calendar itself. What matters is how this dating system shapes our perception of human history. Whether intentionally or not, it creates the impression that humanity is only a little over 2,000 years old. And believe it or not, a surprising number of people genuinely think that humans have been on Earth for roughly that amount of time. That misconception affects how we imagine our own origins. Personally, I've always found alternative timelines more meaningful. Some researchers like to reference sites such as Göbekli Tepe as markers of early civilization, pointing to a cultural horizon stretching back roughly 12,000 years. But even that doesn't capture the full scale of who we are. Modern science shows that anatomically modern humans have existed for around 300,000 years. For 300 millennia, people have been born, lived their lives, and died. More than 100 billion individuals have come and gone. Their experiences, their stories, their knowledge, their struggles, most of them are forgotten. Yet they shaped the world we inherited. That's why a new year may be a pleasant moment to celebrate, but it doesn't define our true beginning. To understand where we're headed, we need to remember where we came from. So instead of focusing only on the calendar flipping from 2026 to 2027, let's step back and trace a much deeper human journey. If we follow that path, one of the most fascinating stops leads us to southeastern Anatolia, where the ruins of Göbekli Tepe changed nearly everything we thought we knew about early society. Until the late 20th century, many scholars believed that meaningful civilization began with early city-states and written records around 3000 to 4000 BC. Then, in 1963, researchers noticed unusual formations at a site that would later be identified as Göbekli Tepe. What they eventually uncovered pushed the origins of organized human activity far deeper into the past. Constructed roughly 12,000 years ago, Göbekli Tepe stands as a silent announcement from prehistoric humans, an early declaration that they understood community, symbols, ritual, and engineering long before agriculture or cities formalized social life. But Göbekli Tepe isn't the only milestone. Across Europe, human presence stretches even further back. In France's Chauvet Cave, handprints and paintings created more than 30,000 years ago still remain on the walls. These marks are among the earliest known intentional traces left by our species. They remind us that humans were creating meaning, expressing themselves, and interpreting their world tens of thousands of years before the first written word. Of course, there are likely countless traces of our ancestors that have yet to be discovered. But even with what we already know, the message is clear. Our story is staggeringly long, complex, and rich, far beyond the narrow window suggested by the modern calendar. When we travel 12,000 years into the past, we find humanity at a turning point, one where our relationship with the natural world began to change forever. In the broader Levant region, stretching across what is now Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, Palestine, Egypt, and nearby territories, early communities began cultivating wheat, grains, and lentils. After countless generations of moving across vast landscapes as hunter-gatherers, people finally started to settle. Agriculture offered stability, and with stability came the first signs of true permanence. Around 9100 BC, on the southern coast of Cyprus, the settlement of Cleomenes emerged, one of the earliest farming communities ever identified. It represents a moment when humans chose to stop chasing resources and instead bring the resources to themselves. And once this shift started, it rarely stopped. Livestock, such as sheep, were eventually domesticated. By 4000 BC, the early cities of Mesopotamia were rising across the region we now associate with Iraq. Ancient traditions claim that the Sumerians founded what may have been the world's oldest city, Eridu, around 6000 BC. In the millennia that followed, places like Uruk, Lagash, and expanded into the largest urban centers of their age, shaping the earliest foundations of civilization. With settled life came something else: the freedom to innovate. When people no longer had to risk their lives daily in search of food, creativity flourished. In Mesopotamia, around 3500 BC, the first wheeled vehicles appeared. Soon after, written communication began taking shape in multiple corners of the ancient world. Cuneiform in Mesopotamia, hieroglyphs in Egypt, and the early scripts of the Indus Valley, near what is now Afghanistan and Pakistan. Humans were no longer just surviving. They were beginning to record their knowledge, describe their beliefs, and encode their experiences for future generations. It's striking, and somewhat tragic, to realize that the regions where so many breakthroughs occurred are now marked by instability. But that is a different story for another time. As centuries passed, humanity's ambitions only grew. Monumental structures began rising across distant continents, often without any connection to each other. The Great Pyramid was built in Egypt around 2000 BC, while at roughly the same era, massive ziggurats towered over ancient Persia. In Britain, the stones of Stonehenge were lifted into place. In China, early pyramid-like structures took form. In Ireland, the passage tombs of Newgrange were constructed with astonishing precision. The fact that these monumental works appeared independently across the world during similar time periods tells us something profound. Humanity wasn't content with simply existing. People wanted to leave their mark, permanent evidence that they were here, shaping the earth and declaring their presence to the ages. As people settled into shared communities, new challenges emerged. Living side by side required structure, and eventually the first written laws appeared. Around 1754 BC, the Babylonian king Hammurabi declared that Marduk, the city's chief deity, had tasked him with establishing justice and order. He issued a series of laws that reflected the growing complexity of life in early societies. These rules weren't arbitrary. They were a natural response to the problems that inevitably arise when large groups of people begin living under the same roof. Not long after, another major transformation began to unfold west of Mesopotamia. By around 800 BC, the foundations of ancient Greek civilization were taking shape. With it came conflict. The Greeks and Persians would enter a long and defining struggle, and although the fighting was brutal, it also coincided with the flourishing of Greek society. Art, drama, and philosophy began to bloom. Sophocles' play, Oedipus Rex, was performed in Athens in 429 BC, and around the same time, Herodotus wrote his detailed account of the Greco-Persian Wars, creating one of the earliest works of historical narrative. Writing, as a practice, spread rapidly. Humans were no longer limited to oral memory. Knowledge could now be recorded and preserved. As written works multiplied, the collective memory of humanity expanded and endured. Future generations didn't have to rediscover everything from scratch. They inherited accumulated knowledge. While Athens was rising culturally, another civilization was forming on the Italian peninsula. Rome would soon emerge as one of the most influential forces in human history. Together, Greece and Rome shaped long-lasting ideas about governance, art, science, and society. Their legacies still define political and philosophical language today. During this era, intellectual breakthroughs arrived one after another. In the 400s BC, the Hippocratic Oath introduced a formal ethical framework for medicine. Plato established the Academy in Athens, a center of philosophical study. Shortly afterward, Aristotle founded the Lyceum, a school that laid the groundwork for what we recognize today as secondary education. But as societies grew, laws and philosophy weren't the only forces shaping human life. Belief systems evolved alongside them. Every major region developed its own spiritual frameworks. Ancient Egyptian religion, the teachings of Confucius in China, the rise of Hinduism and Buddhism in the Indian subcontinent, and later, Christianity and Islam, all emerged from this long, continuous evolution of human thought. Across continents and centuries, people sought meaning, structure, and moral guidance through faith. These developments weren't isolated events. They were interconnected steps in a much larger story about how humanity learned to organize itself, interpret its world, and preserve its identity across generations. Throughout this long stretch of history, countless civilizations rose and fell. While Europe entered its so-called Dark Ages, an extraordinary intellectual awakening emerged across the Middle East. Scholars such as al-Khwarizmi, al-Biruni, Omar Khayyam, al-Battani, and Farazi built upon the foundations of earlier Greek, Chinese, and Indian knowledge. Their work laid critical groundwork for algebra, optics, astronomy, and scientific methodology. It was a moment when the torch of progress moved from one region to another, and scientific thought advanced with remarkable intensity. Yet during this same era, another force appeared that would reshape world history: Genghis Khan. His conquests disrupted entire regions, destroying libraries, records, and centuries of accumulated knowledge. But even the upheaval he caused couldn't extinguish the intellectual momentum that had begun in the Middle East. That wave of insight would eventually spread toward Europe and later influence emerging ideas across the rest of the world. Around the 1200s, major transformations were underway elsewhere as well. Explorers such as Marco Polo journeyed across vast distances, bringing back stories, cultures, and knowledge from far-off lands. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the Aztecs were rising in Mesoamerica, forming a powerful and complex civilization. Europe, still struggling to emerge from centuries of stagnation, soon faced one of its darkest moments. The Black Death swept across the continent, erasing nearly a third of the population. It was a period of unimaginable fear and devastation. But remarkably, out of that overwhelming darkness came a rebirth. Within just a few years of the plague's decline, the Renaissance began around 1350. This new era transformed nearly every aspect of human expression. Art, architecture, music, engineering, every field experienced a revival driven by extraordinary minds. Botticelli, Michelangelo, and Leonardo da Vinci helped trigger one of the greatest cultural awakenings in human history. What followed was not just recovery, but a dramatic acceleration in the human story, an era where creativity and innovation surged forward at a pace the world had never witnessed before. While this period of transformation continued, another breakthrough arrived in Central Europe. Johannes Gutenberg introduced the printing press, a tool that would permanently change humanity's relationship with knowledge. Before this invention, written texts existed, but only a small, privileged group could access them. Printing changed everything. Information began spreading the way a spark races through dry grass. Fast, unstoppable, and transformative. Across the world, new powers and new ideas were reshaping history. As Europe moved deeper into the Renaissance, figures like Kepler and Copernicus began questioning long-held assumptions about the cosmos. Galileo lifted a telescope toward the sky, and with that simple act, thousands of years of certainty began to crumble. Suddenly we had a new sense of scale, a new sense of humility. The telescope became a second set of eyes, revealing a universe far larger and stranger than anyone had imagined. Then came Isaac Newton, who gave language to the forces shaping everything around us. Planetary motion, gravity, the laws of movement. He provided a framework that allowed humanity to start decoding the universe step by step. From that point forward, the pace of change accelerated dramatically. Just listing the names of the people who reshaped our understanding of reality is enough to show how quickly human knowledge expanded. In the 1400s, Leonardo da Vinci, Copernicus, Gutenberg. In the 1500s, Giordano Bruno, Galileo, Kepler, Francis Bacon, Tycho Brahe, Andreas Vesalius. In the 1600s, Isaac Newton, Gottfried Leibniz, Robert Boyle, René Descartes, Blaise Pascal, Christian Huygens, Baruch Spinoza. In the 1700s, Antoine Lavoisier, James Watt, Daniel Bernoulli, Alessandro Volta, Leonhard Euler. In the 1800s, Michael Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell, Charles Darwin, Louis Pasteur, Dmitri Mendeleev, Nikola Tesla. In the 1900s, Albert Einstein, Niels Bohr, Marie Curie, Alan Turing, Richard Feynman, Erwin Schrödinger, Enrico Fermi, Alexander Fleming, Werner Heisenberg. These individuals didn't merely place new stones atop old foundations. Each of them built entire structures of thought, massive intellectual buildings that still hold up the modern world. Their work eventually led to machines, engines, electricity, airplanes, computers, rockets, and the technologies that carried humanity all the way to the moon. From the internet to the devices we hold in our hands, everything around us is the result of centuries of accumulated effort. So when we think about the year 2026, it feels almost impossible to reduce our story to a simple number on a calendar. We're standing on 300,000 years of survival, adaptation, struggle, creativity, and discovery. People sometimes ask what humanity has accomplished in all that time. But simply enduring, simply making it to this moment, is already extraordinary. The fact that we're here today is a miracle built from countless lives before us. And that alone is worth celebrating. So let's appreciate how far we've come and look forward to wherever humanity goes next. And if this journey resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments as well. Your perspective adds something valuable to every story we tell. Until we meet again,